I think it's about time we spoke about Landman Season 2 and the turbulent ride that it's been. When I first discovered Landman last year, I saw Billy Bob Thornton, Jon Hamm and Demi fronting up the cast, and I was excited. Then, as the episodes went through the first season, there was drama around every corner. People treading close to the thin line, which was the law, explosions taking place, deaths, and also an ending which set up Season 2 in a way where I was excited for it to come back. It made us feel like we were gonna get more of what made Season 1 so good. However, sadly, as we now approach the finale of Season 2, it's clear to see that that just simply wasn't the case. This season of Landman has lacked true direction, and everything that made Season 1 so good, other than Billy Bob Thornton, has pretty much been erased. So I wanted to take this time to share my thoughts on Landman Season 2 before it concludes, and explain why it's fallen far from the heights that it was at during Season 1. Here is the downfall of Landman. Just to let you know, this video will contain spoilers. The reduced screen time of Tommy Norris. One of my biggest issues with this season of the show is that we're barely getting any screen time with Tommy Norris, and the screen time that we do get with him is pretty much always with him either standing with his father on the patio, driving from one of the many destinations that he's going to, so we're just in the truck with him. He's inside of Cammy's office or inside of Dan Morell's office. It's all just become a bit predictable with Tommy in this season, and I think the unpredictability of the character was what made Season 1 of the show so enjoyable to watch, and the character not only humorous but also likeable, because he didn't take no BS. In this season, it feels like Tommy's screen time has been drastically reduced, and instead of spending time with him on site with the workers, which I feel should have been a key part of the show, considering it's called Landman, it's instead been replaced by soap opera style storylines with Angela and Ainsley feeling like they've had way more screen time than what's needed, and Rebecca pining over Charlie Newsom. In fact, the reduced screen time of Tommy can pretty much be attributed to the Angela and Ainsley storyline and their quest to make the old folk feel young again, and Ainsley also going off to college. Don't get me wrong, it's necessary to have those characters, but they're just so two-dimensional and offer nothing more than what's on the surface, so it just ends up feeling like a complete waste of time. I understand it's essential for Tommy to have a family as it humanizes him and provides a different angle other than just work, but we don't watch the show for them. We watch it for all of the drama that's going on with MTex and Tommy, so whenever it cuts to them, I essentially just count down the minutes until they're off the screen. They're just walking cliches. Take the penultimate episode for example. Ainsley's college storyline got such a large focus, and I just honestly didn't see the point in it. Their story never connects into the main one, so it's time taken away from actually progressing Tommy's story forward. The reduction of screen time of a great like Billy Bob Thornton in space of two characters that genuinely don't bring anything to the show is baffling to me, and I'm surprised that it was signed off because at points, it's not felt like I've been watching Landman. The characters feel different. The first thing I want to address is the fact that it feels like many of the important characters have pretty much changed compared to how they were in the first season of the show. Take two of the most important side characters, Cooper and Rebecca. Let's first start with Cooper. Within the first season, we saw that Cooper was somebody that didn't want to live in his father's shadow. He wanted to make something of himself, and he almost wanted to prove his father wrong. As well as that, he was carrying the guilt of the explosion on the side, and he was beginning to fall in love with Ariana. It made for an interesting character arc to explore because there were many different things that he wanted to overcome. When we take a look at the character in this season of the show, all of that ambition that he had in the first season just fell to the wayside in order to focus on his love story with Ariana. He's another character that's had less screen time, and for the most part, whenever we've seen him on screen, his sole focus has been going after the girl. Even when she broke up with him, he was just sitting out on her porch. If I'm being honest, I do like their love story, but it's just been dragged out way too much. I liked the Cooper that had ambition because it felt like there were more layers to him. Plus, I'd also say that when Cooper had the ambition within him, that was the very thing that allowed us to spend more time on the sides, because he was the person that we'd essentially see the perspective of a worker through. So that's contributing to another reason why we're spending less time there. In the penultimate episode, when we saw that Cooper defended Ariana and beat up that guy, that was probably the best piece of the story that he's had in the entirety of the season. They need to bring back the ambitious Cooper in Season 3 of the show. Who knows, maybe if the whole story of him potentially going to jail is a focus, it'll add more depth to him again. Another character that I feel like season 2 of the show has ruined is Rebecca. What I loved about Rebecca in season 1 of the show was that she was this harsh, blunt, fierce young female lawyer that was holding her own in a room full of men that were completely underestimating her. She was a surprising character, and she brought the power to Tommy that he was never going to be able to have without her by his side. However, this time round, in season 2, not only has she got less screen time, but we've only really seen her up against the opposition once, and that was in episode 3. Aside from that, it's mainly been focused on her pining over Charlie Newsom, and it's as if her whole demeanour has now changed. She's adopted this Angela and Ainsley type mindset where all she cares about is the boy. And before, she was a fierce, strong, independent woman that could put any man in their place. So I feel it's just a bit confusing that they decided to change the character so much. I don't have an issue with the show focusing on the fact that she feels lonely in her life. I totally get that it's an avenue that they could have explored, but to essentially put her under Charlie Newsom's thumb, it was too much of a change, and the identity of the character was just lost within that. The loss of Jon Hamm and there not being a suitable replacement. Now, we all know that Jon Hamm is an incredibly talented actor, and within season 1 of the show, he absolutely nailed the role of Monty. Killing him off was vital for season 1 to be as good as what it was, but what I think the show is feeling is the loss of a name like Jon Hamm. The ability that he has when performing a character is hard to come by, and when himself and Billy Bob Thornton were on screen together, the chemistry was so believable, and it was a pleasure to watch, and I feel like that's something that was never replaced. Within this season, the show brought in Sam Elliott to play TL, which I was really excited to see, but if I'm being honest, I'm a little underwhelmed by it. I loved Sam Elliott in Taylor Sheridan's other show, 1883, because there was so much to the character with him losing his wife and his daughter. You could even argue that TL is a relatively similar character because he's upset over what happened to his wife Dorothy, but it's just been the same ever since we saw him in episode 1. He just sits there talking about how he's on the cusp of dying, how he's wasted his life, and he just spends the day watching the sunrise, the sunset, and the horses grazing on the field. His best performance was in episode 4 during the funeral, but ever since then, it just feels like everything his character does is just a bit of a copy and paste. The story became boring. Now, whilst all of the issues I've mentioned before about the characters feeling different, the screen time of Tommy Norris being reduced, and the loss of a big name in the show are important things that have contributed to the show's demise. The thing that I think has hung over Landman like a big dark grey cloud is the fact that the show has just been a bit boring. When I think back to season 1 of the show, it felt like in every episode there was something big that happened. I remember the opening scene where the worker died during the accident on site, the explosion which killed workers, Cooper getting beat up and Tommy getting revenge on them, the cartel having a strong presence, Ainsley being followed and potentially kidnapped, and also Monty's death. Within season 2, nothing of that magnitude has happened. Granted, in the penultimate episode, we finally got 2 large moments, when Ariana was attacked in the alley and Cooper saved her, and we also had Tommy being fired by Cammy. But it's just not enough to save the season that I feel that overall has failed. Dan Morell hasn't been half as threatening as I thought he'd be. We saw how dangerous his crew were in season 1, and we've not seen any of it since. It's all just been diplomatic discussions and meetings where there's a sense of passive aggression at its core, but it's just not enough for me. I've also found the story of the $400 million Louisiana rig a bit tiresome. I get that it's a lot of money that they stand to lose, but with Cammy, an owner of a company that doesn't have a clue what's going on, I find it difficult to feel the risk because if it all comes crumbling down, I half expected it anyway. My overall thoughts. Overall, when looking at Landman Season 2 as a whole, I think it's been very average, with the odd moment within it that's allowed it to shine. Moments like Episode 4 and the ending of Episode 9. The first season made it a show that I was excited to tune into every week, and I couldn't wait to discuss it with everyone because there was always something going on. I also found it interesting learning about the industry from it, whereas this season, it's just kind of dragged on. It's felt a little bit choppy with the different storylines, and it hasn't really lived up to its name, Landman. I am optimistic with the finale though, because I feel Tommy being fired and Cooper also potentially facing jail is something that could easily set up the story to go back in a similar direction to what we had in season 1 when it returns, or maybe even its tone. So that's something we're just gonna have to hold out for. So, there you have it, the downfall of Landman.